Hey guys, this is Dawson Discussions, and my name is Nathan L. Dawson Jr. In this video, I'll be talking about the beginnings, creation, purpose, and the future growth of this show, Dawson Discussions. So stay tuned. So the name. Why did I choose the name Dawson's Discussions? This is actually a very easy one. The name comes from my real life last name, Dawson. Spell it D-A-W-S-O-N. And discussions. Discussions means the process of talking about something with another person or a group of people. And of course, the other person, group, or people is the viewers who decide to leave a comment in the video. And of course, my subscribers. And of course, I like alliteration. So Dawson's Discussions was a good fit. So who is the target audience for Dawson's Discussions? So the target audience, this is also another easy one. Primarily targeting the non-immigrant African-American community only, not minorities, not people of color, not marginalized groups, not communities of colors, and also not underserved communities. Of course, the other groups, the people who are not classified by society as African-American or Black American are not prohibited from watching. But again, everything I will talk about will be from a pro-Black perspective. So what are the topics I'll be talking about? So the topics I'm going to be talking about is Black wealth, Black economic empowerment, Black politics, Black solidarity, which is an awareness of the shared interests, objectives, standards, and sympathies, creating a psychological sense of unity amongst Black people, Black group economics, Black collective economics, Black cooperative economics, pretty much issues that I see that affects the African American communities in the United States, whether positively or negatively. I will probably talk about it. So what was the inspiration of me starting the show Dawson's Discussions? Dr. Claude Anderson is the biggest inspiration when it comes to this channel. He has held the highest positions in federal and state government and politics. He was the state coordinator of education for Florida under Governor Reuben Askew during the 1970s. After successful social reform projects in Florida and leading President Jimmy Carter's Florida campaign to win the state, Carter appointed Anderson as the federal co-chairman for a commission of governors in the southeast states. So in that position, Dr. Claude Anderson, he held the rank of assistant secretary in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. He chaired a commission, funded and directed economic development projects for the governors in those states. The projects he funded created jobs and businesses in those states. As executive director of 2 economic development corporations for the city of Miami, Florida, he oversaw funding of more than 30 businesses. Although he has been a political independent for many years, he was a major planner and coordination of the 1988 Democratic Convention in Atlanta and has taught at all levels of education. His concept of Powernomics is a package of principles and strategies that explain race and offer a guide for Black America to become a much more self-sufficient and economically competitive group in the United States of America. Other influence are Malcolm X's, his Black nationalism influenced me to start this channel. Also TD News Hip Hop, Professor Black Truth is also a big inspiration of me starting this show. Of course, Earn Your Leisure and Black Wealth Renaissance for the financial aspect. And of course, Dane Calloway with his history whenever it comes to Black America, Black America's history in the United States, and of course our ancient history that he be researching. Okay, and some people who probably watching this video probably going to be asking me, why would I target just Black people and not be inclusive with other ethnic groups, and that I'm probably going to be accused of being racist. So essentially, I'm going to make this quick analogy. Also, I am a stock investor. I invest in the stock market. So one of the common things stock market investors do is to invest in what you know. This idea comes from Peter Lynch, the legendary mutual fund manager who managed the Magellan Fund at Fidelity Investments from 1977 to 1990. And then he had turned it from, I think, from 20 million to 14 billion with 29.2% returns annually. So essentially, the invest in what you know investing tip is to use your specialized knowledge to hone in on stocks. You can actually analyze, study them, and then decide if they're worth investing into. So the best way to invest is actually to look at companies competing in the field where you work and help individual investors find good undervalued stocks. This is actually called value stock market investing. Essentially, I'm taking that very same approach of value stock market investing, and I'm actually investing and targeting my fellow non-immigrant Black people, because I know my fellow Black people's history and heritage than other people do know about us. And then I also know the Black people history and heritage, and I know other ethnic groups and other racial groups and their history and heritage. My parents also, they're also Black, and they were raised in ghettos. It wasn't a middle class neighborhood by American standards. I was raised in a ghetto from birth until 2006, and then I moved to a middle class neighborhood. I understand the balance sheet of the median Black population because it's going to zero. It's going to be zero by the 2050s. And by balance sheet, I'm actually talking about the assets owned minus the liabilities owed. I also have a family member who was also in jail. My great-grandfather on my mother's side was a World War II Army draftee from 1943 to 1945 and was properly denied a GI Bill because he was Black and he lived in Arkansas. I also understand Black culture. I understand the Black needs, the Black wants, like the needs and wants. I know the Black political wants. I just have that natural awareness with a shared interest, objective standards, and sympathies, created a psychological sense of unity with the non-immigrant Black Americans. It's very similar to investing in the stock market, at least using the value paradigm of investing. And because of that, as compared to other groups, I see that the African American community is actually undervalued as compared to Asian Americans, White Americans, Arab Americans, Hispanic Americans, and the Latin Americans. So how so? Well, it all comes from benign neglect. The concept of benign neglect was coined by the late Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, a Democrat from New York, in a January 1970 memo to President Richard M. Nixon, Republican, while he served as the latter's urban affairs counselor. The widely circulated memo, which was leaked to the press in March of that very same year, read, "The time may have come when the issue of race could benefit from a period of benign neglect." At that historical juncture, Moynihan declared Americans need a period in which Negroes, which is the older term for African Americans and Black Americans, a period in which Negro progress continued and racial rhetoric faded. Moynihan believed that the anti-poverty programs of the Great Society of the 1960s had failed miserably, not only because they had attempted to use money alone to solve the nation's inability to properly educate the African American poor, but also because they did not raise issues in reference to a viability of integration as a solution to U.S. racial problems. Again, also in that same memo, he also wrote, "Greater attention to Indians, Mexican Americans, and Puerto Ricans would be useful," Mr. Moynihan had reported. So because of benign neglect that has been in full effect since the 1970s, all these other special interest groups using the plights of African Americans to become the new special interest group and have special legislation passed for them. Blacks are then left at the back of the bus since the 1970s, while the government began to focus on women's rights, disabled rights, homosexual rights, transgenders rights, illegal immigrant rights, and now probably eventually is going to be the rights of pedophiles. Well, the Black plight has never been resolved because we have allowed our cause and concerns to be lumped and overtaken by every other group, and it dilutes the Black cause. And that's why, and because of that, that's actually why I hate being called a racial minority, person of color, and a part of the Black and brown communities. Because essentially, person of color doesn't really mean African American. Person of color actually means immigrant groups. Because in the year 1965, the Immigration and Naturalization Act, I think I probably got the name wrong, actually allowed, lifted the restrictions for Asian Americans, well, Asian immigration and Hispanic immigration. And then, of course, over time, those populations have been skyrocketing. While, of course, the Black population has been hovered at no more than 50% of the U.S. population. And of course, minorities again doesn't really mean black. Doesn't really mean Black people. Minority actually means white women. To be serious with you guys, and also person of color. Of course, person of color again They also mean immigrants and then the descendants of those immigrants. Because again, black people is not the only color. Because again, brown would be the Latinx and Hispanic communities, also the Arab communities. Asians, they'll be considered yellow. Native Americans on the reservation, they'll be considered red. And then all these colors doesn't really mean, well, the term a person of color, people of color, doesn't just mean black. So that's why I don't really like those terms like BIPOC, racial minorities. I don't like those terms because those are actually terms created by the left wing in order for them to continue on with benign neglect. Just like how the left wing say states' rights is a racial code word, that I'm actually gonna say that racial minority, person, people of color, black and brown, BIPOC, those are also code words that the left wing use in order for them to keep continuing on with benign neglect. Now, what do I mean by special interest groups getting special legislations? Well, for example, recently Asian Americans, they got $50 million in grants, a $5 billion anti-Asian hate law after 1 year of increased hate crimes because of COVID-19. Because, COVID, it wound up and it started in China. And then, of course, Americans, they're attacking the Asians because, COVID had shut down the whole entire world. And then now people are attacking Asians, and now they're hating them. The White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders was formed on June 7th, 1999 as a United States governmental office that works to empower Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in order to improve their quality of lives, raise their standards of living of their families and their communities, and in order for them to fully participate more in the U.S. economy. Not to mention, former President Donald J. Trump, a Republican, right-wing leaning capitalist, signed Executive Order 13872 to help broaden access to the economic resources for the AAPI community on May 13th, 2019. Another example is with the Native Americans on the reservations. They received $31 billion under Joe Biden's administration. And I think recently they received $850 million to the Bureau of Indian Education. And of course, the Hispanic and Latin American communities, I think they got like $4 billion for immigration issues. Not only that, they also got Dreamers and DACA, like these very major legislation just for them. And of course, more recently, Black Americans not only got Juneteenth signed as a federal holiday not too long ago, and we're also going to get Harriet Tubman on the $20 bills. So again, we don't really get grants, low interest loans whatsoever, just symbolism. And of course, taking down the Confederate statues, symbolism, and then of course older imagery on certain items like groceries, like the Aunt Jemima and then whatnot. That's all symbolism. So we get symbolism while other ethnic groups, they actually get hardened legislation, like actual real tangible legislation, like money going their way, while we get $0 and 0 cents. But the only closest thing that we can actually get to money is having Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. So we get like no grants, no low interest loans to start up a business, no low interest loans to buy our first homes, and of course no low interest loans to for investing property, so we can actually be landlords to then build wealth that way. So it seems to me that Daniel P. Moynihan's memo is in full force because, again, just like I always said before, greater attention to Indians, the Native Americans on the reservations, and Mexican Americans and Puerto Ricans, they fall under that Hispanic Latin community would be useful. So essentially, benign neglect is in full force. Now, is the government not giving grants to Black people racist? Just like how they're giving grants and specialized legislation that's not symbolic to other racial groups. Again, to me, the Asian American community, Native American community, Hispanic Latin American community, the LGBTQIA+ community is overvalued as compared to the non-immigrant African American community. I wouldn't want to invest in those communities or actually take some of my resources and then give it to those communities because, again, they're overvalued. Look at all the grants and specialized government legislations that those groups are getting. So there's really no need for me to keep investing or to begin investing in those communities because they're overly valued. And again, going back to value investing, you want to invest in things that are undervalued because they fell out of favor in the whole entire stock market. So in this case, the stock that I am investing in is the black stock, and then they're undervalued because I see that they have potential, and then again, all that also it's cheap because again there's a whole lot of things that I can actually do in order to put my money into the black stock, and then of course when it goes out and competes, then the stock actually will go from undervalued to valued, and then of course it's going to go from value to overvalued, and then when it's overvalued, and then you just sell it at a profit. Kind of like a bad analogy, but you kind of understand where I'm getting at, especially if you're a stock market investor. So again, if the government and the society as a whole don't want to invest into the African American community like the other groups that the government is doing, again with the LGBTQIA, they get executive order on preventing and combating discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation on day one when President Joe Biden got sworn into office. And then, the Hispanic Latin Americans, they get $4 billion for immigration issues. The Dreamers, they probably want to get a pathway to citizenship, probably at the end of the decade, I think. Native Americans, they received $31 billion, $850 million was sent to the Bureau of Indian Education. President Trump signed Executive Order 13872 to help broaden access to the economic resources for the API community on May 13th, 2019. They also got $50 in grants, $5 billion in an Asian hate law after 1 year of increased hate crimes against them. And of course, like all these things, like all these other racial groups, they get all these privileges and all these things. Meanwhile, the black community actually gets nothing. So again, if the government and society don't want to invest in the African American community, like how they invest in other racial groups, then I'll be brave enough to do so myself, and then call upon my fellow black viewers to also do so through ethnic aggregation. Again, through this book, again by Dr. Claude Anderson, same person I was telling you about who influenced me to actually start this channel. So again, all this goes right back to invest in what you know. I don't know the Asian American community. I don't know the Native American community, those who live on the reservations. I don't know the Hispanic Latin American community. I don't know the LGBTQIA plus community. I can't understand them unlike black people, because black people, I'm black myself. I know my people. I know my history. I know my heritage. I know what we've been through as a people, like the discrimination and whatnot. Because not only that, those other groups piggyback off of black suffering to catapult their causes forward, and they have more wealth, as in a higher net worth, assets minus their liabilities, than black people do. And I just don't have their shared interests. I don't have their shared objectives. I don't have their shared standards, and I don't have their shared sympathies with those communities. But I do have it with the black community. And because since I know the black community, I'm actually going to invest my time, energy, and money and capital and whatever resources that I have to the black community, because those communities have not fell out of favor by the broader American community, unlike the black community. And of course, whenever a black person like myself or any other black YouTuber or content creator post pro-black content, or have a conversation of trying to get into black empowerment, or trying to go by the principles of this book, Powernomics, a National Plan to Empower Black America by Dr. Claude Anderson, then all of a sudden we are all one people and we shouldn't be discriminating like that. But at the same time, to me, it's an annoying deflection by folks who fear black people feeling good about themselves and then have clarity on what's happening to them in a society, and then actually trying to empower ourselves, trying to improve our relationships with one another, trying to improve the black nuclear family and whatnot. But then again, if we are one people, why does the government keep employing benign neglect policies against black Americans while they pay much closer attention to other non-black groups? Again, Asian Americans, $50 million in grants, a $5 million anti-hate law after 1 year of increased hate crimes against them. The White House Initiative on Asian American Pacific Islanders was formed June 7th, 1999, as a governmental office that works to empower the API community. Then President Trump, a Republican, right-winger, capitalist, conservative-leaning politician, signed Executive Order 13872 to help broaden access to economic resources for the API community on May 13th, 2019. Then you have the Native Americans. They got $31 billion under Joe Biden within the first 100 days. And then $850 million was given to the Bureau of Indian Education. Then Hispanic Americans, they get $4 billion for immigration issues. Dreamers are probably going to get a pathway to citizenship. Then in the last decade, you have DACA by former President Obama. Then you have the LGBTQIA+ gets the executive order on preventing and combating discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation signed into law, signed into executive order on day one on President Joe Biden's first day in office. But black Americans want to get Juneteenth as a federal holiday, and Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. Again, no grants. No low interest loans for business creation, mortgages for home ownership, or to buy a property and be a landlord whatsoever. We all just get symbolism. So you do say that we are all one people, but the government don't see black people included into the we are one people. American society did not see black people as Americans from 1783 of the signing of the Treaty of Paris all the way up until 1968 with the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, or the Housing Rights Act of 1968, in order to officially end the Civil Rights Act, or the Civil Rights Movement of the 1950s and 1960s. Only when a black person posts pro-black content or have a conversation of black empowerment, or actually try to go by the principles of this book, Bidenomics, now all of a sudden, we are one people. I think the main reason why they actually say it is because they actually want to take credit of our contributions to American society, because they just want to say, like, no, you're not African American, you're just American. And then, so we shouldn't be discriminating ourselves or try to promote ethnic aggregation from this book, trying to make ourselves competitive, just like how the Jewish communities, how they, kind of sort of isolate themselves, and they have their own economic base, and then they'll be able to take their money and then do whatever they want. But whenever we do something good, they say that it's not an African American contribution, it's an American contribution. That's actually what I'm trying to get at a few moments ago. But whenever anything that is actually our fault, or anything that bad happens, it's our fault. Black on black violence, inner city shootings, the black unemployment rate, the black nuclear family is in shambles. Black people aren't trying hard enough. Black people don't need special legislation, executive orders like the Asian American community, Native American community, Hispanic Latin American community, the LGBTQIA+ community does. And black people aren't healthy enough because it's all their fault. And then, whatnot. But at the same time, you can't call me divisive when you divide yourself amongst other people also. If you're a Democrat, then you're dividing yourself. If you say that you're a Republican, you're dividing yourself. Even if you say that you're a proud American, you're dividing yourself from the world. Like if you're left wing, you're dividing yourself from the right wing. If you're right wing, you're dividing yourself from the left wing. If you say you want low taxes, you're dividing yourself from the people who say that they want high taxes, and then vice versa. Same with those who want to have electoral reform to gerrymandering versus the people who say, no, just keep gerrymandering. Same thing with those who say, I support voting voting IDs, you're dividing yourself against those who say we don't need voting IDs. If you're a liberal, you're dividing yourself. If you're proud conservative, you're dividing yourself. Capitalist, same thing. Anti-capitalist, same thing. You're proud. You have Judeo-Christian values, same thing. You're dividing yourself against those who aren't Judeo-Christian, because you're actually dividing yourself from Muslims. If you're religious, you're dividing yourselves from the secularists, and then vice versa. If you're God-fearing, you're dividing yourselves from the atheists. And then if you're an atheist, you're dividing yourself from the God-fearing. I can go on and on and on and on and on. So you can't tell me that I'm being divisive, but you're using all these labels to divide yourself from the rest of humanity. It just doesn't work like that. The way how I see it just doesn't work like that. So again, all this is going back to invest in what you know. Again, I don't know the Asian American community, the Native American community, the Hispanic Latin American community, the LGBTQIA plus community. I can't understand them unlike black people because I'm black myself and I know my people's interests, you know, the history, the suffering. I know the balance sheets. You know, I know their struggles. I know what they want in life. And then like etc. Like I actually relate to them. And then every time I actually talk about pro-black information, I actually get that, not only that mental, but I also get that spiritual connection. I just don't get that with the rest of America, the rest of these communities. I just don't have that connection. It is what it is. I just don't have that connection. So again, I can't understand those other communities, but I understand black people a little bit more. And I would, and then again, invest what you know. So since I actually know them, I'm actually going to invest my time, energy. When I have my business, I'm actually going to take my business and then hire my own people, black people, so I can actually, you know, give them, so I can actually lift them up and then to make them a little bit more competitive in society. Again, all based off this book by Dr. Claude Anderson. So I plan to use this platform to invest in the Black American community for their empowerment, so we can actually be valued like the other racial communities. I mean, again, the main reason why, really to sum up this video is that I see Black America as being undervalued. And again, using that analogy of value investing, I'm actually going to invest into Black America because I see the potential of them going from undervalued to value to eventually overly valued, you know, just like that. So that's actually the whole entire point of me making this video. Same thing like why I actually you know, just created this channel, learn on this video. Okay, so the future. Well, in order to grow this channel, I plan on to eventually learn how to video edit to make my videos much more watchable as compared to other videos out there. Also to I also want to go outside of black issues and then expand it to other topics like my entrepreneurial ventures to actually share with my fellow black people, to say that, you know, I'm doing this today, so you can also do this too. Same with my investing. Also, killing two birds with one stone with that. I also want to release some financial literacy videos, and among other things. And of course, if you like this video, please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and turn on the bell notification. And again, this is Dawson Scotchins. My name is Nathan L. Dawson Jr., and I will see you in the upcoming videos if you are a subscriber. So take care and have a nice day.